11th hour deal? Hours before Homeland Security funding is to run out, will Congress act? Pope Francis back home. The Holy Father returns to work at the Vatican after a week on retreat. Conservative who's who. Republican presidential hopefuls seek support at the annual CPAC convention. And cashing in on the Pope's popularity. An American restaurant chain invites Francis for dinner. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 27th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Well, the House clears the way for a short-term spending bill to fund Homeland Security, but the issue is far from settled. Democrats oppose funding for just 3 weeks instead of the full year. Conservative Republicans aren't happy that the bill no longer overturns the president's executive actions on immigration. Many of them gathering right now at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, in Maryland. Our chief White House correspondent, Susanne LaFrankie, is there.
Brian, thousands of conservative Republicans continue to size up the field of prospective 2016 presidential candidates. While some believe that the GOP is swaying more libertarian, we found plenty of social conservatives.
We prayed about it and ultimately decided to get in.
If we were to judge by these crushing crowds, the Wisconsin governor's faith-based values seem to be striking a chord with American voters. Self-identified Catholic politicians Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and Rick Santorum also drew enthusiastic crowds at the convention. Former CEO Hewlett-Packard Carly Fiorina, who is considering a run for president, believes the country wants a leader who affirms life.
What distinguishes us as conservatives is that we believe every life is precious, every life has potential. We believe that no one of us is any better than any other one of us because all of us are made in God's image.
Many here believe Americans are deeply concerned and politically motivated by the recent attacks on religious liberty, both domestically and abroad.
People of faith have been mobilized in response to the intense effort of secularists to destroy religion in America, and in response to the radical Islamists who literally would destroy our religion.
But it wasn't only presidential hopefuls who were talking about national security, the Islamic State, and relations with Iran. Fox News' Sean Hannity weighed in with us.
It is sad. The world needs to unite and fight hard against modern-day evil.
Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush made his much-anticipated appearance here at the conference. While he has not formally announced his presidency, he is believed to be a leading contender. He is winning very hard to win over conservative activists. From CPAC, Susanne LaFrankie, EWTN News Nightly.
And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. We still don't know the fate of hundreds of Christians kidnapped by the Islamic State this week. A couple of members of Congress are urging action. Jason Calvi is joining us tonight with that story.
Ryan, two members say the situation is bleak and action is needed right now. One of them is the only Assyrian member of Congress.
You're dealing with barbarians.
Democrat Anna Eshoo of California has followed the ISIS kidnapping of up to 220 Assyrian Christians. She's a member of that ancient Christian community.
They are the descendants of the original Christians and speak a form of Aramaic that was the language of Jesus.
It's unclear what has happened to those Christians kidnapped by ISIS this week. Representative Eshoo says Assyrians are a vulnerable minority in the region.
Make no mistake about it, Christians, Catholics are targeted. They are targeted for what they believe in, for their faith.
The Democrat is joining her co-chair on the Caucus on Religious Minorities in the Middle East, Republican Jeff Fortenberry, sending this letter to President Obama. It urges the administration to help secure a safe haven for religious minorities in Syria and Iraq, and to help those who have fled home. Representative Fortenberry hand-delivered the bipartisan letter to Secretary of State John Kerry this week.
We have to contain this horror show that ISIL is putting on in front of the world. It's not only necessary to protect innocent people, it's to try to prevent a collapse of the region, which has profound implications for the national security of America and international stability.
Their plea comes as Iraqi security forces fight back. They say they've taken over 2 villages from ISIS this week. But the Islamic State still controls about a third of Iraq and Syria.
This is 21st century weaponry in the hands of 8th century barbarians. They are a threat to civilization itself.
two representatives don't see eye to eye on everything. National Right to Life gives Representative Eshoo a 0 when it comes to life issues, while Fortenberry gets a 100% approval rating. But they're working together on this issue, Brian, fighting ISIS.
All right, thank you, Jason. And the mother of American journalist James Foley tells the London Times we need to end our hatred for Jihadi John. He's the London-raised ISIS terrorist seen on Islamic State videos who's believed to have murdered Diane Foley's son last year. Foley, who is Catholic, says she forgives the man, identified as Mohammed Amwazi, a computer science graduate. She noted that he grew up in a comfortable upbringing, but he's using his gifts for hatred and brutality. British spy agencies are facing questions as to how Amwazi was able to travel to Syria. He's been on their radar for 6 years. 7 people have been killed in overnight shootings in 4 different homes in southeastern Missouri. Police say Joseph Jesse Aldridge went house to house in a small town, shooting people before apparently killing himself. The body of an older woman was found dead in a 5th home, but police haven't yet connected her death with the others. The Missouri State Highway Patrol is not discussing a possible motive. Pope Francis is back in the Vatican tonight after this week's Lenten retreat. He spent 5 days with his advisors, praying and meditating in Aricia near Rome. The Church encourages all of us to pray and make sacrifices during the season of Lent. A Carmelite priest led the spiritual exercises. The Holy Father thanked him, saying it's not easy to lead a retreat for priests.
Siamo un po' complicati tutti, ma lei è riuscito a seminare.
The Pope saying we're all a bit complicated, but the retreat master succeeded in sowing seeds. Francis returned home earlier today. Father John Wauck, professor at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, joining us from Rome. Father John, fresh off retreat, Pope Francis already has some fires to put out. What do you make between the reported battle between the finance czar, Cardinal George Pell, and the Vatican? Is the Vatican as dysfunctional as some of these leaks suggest?
I think that Cardinal Pell has been brought in to bring a touch of professional management, financial management in particular, to the Holy See, and it's unrealistic to think that a reform of that sort wasn't going to ruffle some feathers. I think certainly some cardinals, today the news was that some cardinals were complaining about how much power Cardinal Pell was accumulating. Naturally, when you're conducting a reform, it means taking hold of the reins of an institution, and that's what Cardinal Pell has been doing. There's also been some talk about the amount of money that he's spent in the 6 months that he's been here in Rome. And again, I would say that if you're going to bring a professional management perspective, handling on the Vatican, it means you're going to have to pay professional consultants, and that costs money. And that's what Cardinal Pell has done. He's brought in outside experts to take a look at the Vatican situation financially and also in terms of its government structure. And those consultants cost money, but it's part of the reform, and I think it's a necessary part.
All right, also, Pope Francis has appointed the former chief prosecutor for clergy sex abuse as the Archbishop of Malta. Bishop Charles Scicluna took a tough line against clergy sex abuse. How is the church handling that now, do you think?
I think that in part thanks to the efforts of people like Bishop Scicluna, the church has come a long way in the handling of the sex abuse. Right now, the frequency of reported sex abuse is way, way down. And it's not a surprise that the Pope has decided to name Bishop Scicluna to the See of Valletta in Malta. And he's one of the most important Maltese clergy probably in the world. And I think the only question was whether he was going to stay in Rome working, or he was going to be named to the See in Malta, where he was already functioning as a coadjutor bishop, essentially.
So an interesting week in Rome, and Pope Francis, before leaving his retreat, said that it's not easy to give exercises to priests. As a priest, do you agree with that?
Well, sure. I know exactly what the Pope is talking about. It's a bit, giving a retreat to a group of priests is a little bit like a chef having to cook for a group of chefs. Everyone is a critic. Everyone thinks they know how to do this better than you do, and they're listening with one ear is on what can I get out of this, but the other ear is essentially the professional critic, inside every priest who's saying, was that the best way to explain that point or not? And what the Pope was saying, I think, is that despite the tough audience, the Bruno Secondin, the preacher, the Carmelite preacher, had managed to plant some seeds in the hearts and souls of the priests. And
thank you.
That's a good thing, obviously.
Yeah. Thanks for your perspective. Father John Wauck joining us from Rome. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Coming up, the government will now regulate the internet. What does that mean to you? And a restaurant chain could attract Catholic customers with a quirky ad campaign playing on the Pope's popularity. Thank God for Friday, and thank you for joining us on this Friday evening, February 27th. I'm Brian Patrick with the EWTN News Nightly team. The internet is now seen as a public utility that must be used in the public interest under FCC regulation. The Federal Communications Commission voted yesterday for net neutrality, setting rules governing internet service providers. The decision means that companies like AT&T, Verizon, Time Warner, and Comcast that control broadband access cannot block or slow web traffic. They have to provide equal access to all data. It also means companies like YouTube and Netflix can't strike deals with internet service providers to load their data faster. Howard Homonoff is a Forbes contributor writing on media disruption and regulatory policy. He's joining us by Skype from Tenafly, New Jersey. Howard, what does this FCC net neutrality decision mean for most of us who use the internet more on a consumer level?
I think for consumers, in the short term, you won't see a whole lot of change. This is a new regime, a new structure, and we'll see nothing immediately will change. The long-term question is, I think, the one that is up for grabs.
Those who oppose this measure say that this is really government outreach or overreach, I should say. It fixes a problem that didn't exist. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Well, I'm going to have to be a bit of a raging moderate on this one. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I think that the intentions, the motivations behind the rule are perhaps understandable. The overarching principles of having a fair, fast, and open internet is all fine and well and good. My concern would be, and I think where critics and I might agree, is the concern about what the real-world consequence will be of bringing in a historically old-fashioned regulatory regime, such as what's called common carrier regulation, to a very dynamic sector of the economy like the internet.
Yeah, it does provide a dilemma there. So the FCC just argued a few years back that the Supreme Court, or before the Supreme Court, that the internet is an information service. What has changed between now and then?
Well, let's put aside the politics for a moment, and I think that what in terms of the facts on the ground that have changed is the ubiquity of the internet and its importance in everyday life. And I think that you would point to it from a positive perspective, as that just shows its tremendous appeal in the workings of the economy to those concerned about the future. There is a fear of what might happen if something were to upset the consumer's access or reasonable access to that internet service.
Is there any chance that this regulation will stifle the already flourishing internet?
I think that's a concern. I do. We have to see how the regulations first are literally written, how they are implemented, how the courts respond to them, and how a number of actors, companies in the marketplace respond. And hopefully what will come of this, although I have been critical of the decision, I am an optimist or certainly hopeful that at the end of the day, this will not undermine what is one of the most vibrant, dynamic, and exciting parts of our entire economy.
Yeah, it's a different world with the internet, certainly. Howard Homonoff joining us, a Forbes contributor writing on media disruption and regulatory policy. We appreciate you being with us, Howard.
Thank you.
And the Holy Father hasn't responded yet to an invitation from an American restaurant chain to eat at one of its restaurants. Red Robin hopes to lure Francis, and many others, I'm sure, with an offbeat promotion tied to the Pope's popularity. Wyatt Goolsby has that story.
Pope Francis is not scheduled to come to the United States until September, when he plans to visit 3 American cities. But the restaurant chain Red Robin says if the Pope comes right now and eats at one of their more than 500 locations, they will give all their visitors free crab cake burgers on Fridays in Lent. They're even encouraging their customers to tweet invites to the Pope using the hashtag #RopeInThePope. Marketing professor Dr. Andrew Abella doubts the promotion will have a big impact.
I think they could have done better. I wish they had called us first, because there's some of the things that they would know, for example, that the Pope is coming in September, so he's not going to be here in Lent. So the chances of him actually going to one of their stores is 0.
Dr. Abella has written extensively on the ethics of business. From a Catholic viewpoint, he says there's nothing wrong with businesses that use Pope Francis in their marketing as long as it's not disrespectful. He says there are other options to attract fans of Pope Francis.
If they made an attempt, say, for example, to hire homeless people, they say, if you give a person a fish sandwich, you feed him for a day. If you teach him to be a waiter or a cook, then you give him back his dignity.
Regardless of the Pope's plans, American Catholics are used to seeing advertising featuring fish on Fridays, enough to tempt me and my colleague Mark Irons to give the crab cake burger a try ourselves.
I wanted to show this to the camera because this is, look at this. This is humongous. I don't know how is one person supposed to eat this?
Don't you think in the spirit of Francis, though, he'd probably take it out to those on the streets? He'd probably split it.
That's true. He probably would.
At least for the two of us, the ads involving the Pope are all in good fun.
How do you think they say crab cake burger in Italian?
Carpe diem?
Oh, I've heard of that before. Carpe diem. That means seize the crab, right?
In Virginia, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, an online magazine puts the dignity of the human person back into fashion. And saying goodbye to Star Trek's Mr. Spock. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, this last week of February, Body Awareness Month, coincides with Fashion Week in 2 major international cities. Catherine Szeltner reports on the fashion-body image connection.
As models sashay down the catwalk in London and Milan for Fashion Week, body image is thrust back into the spotlight. And that's not always as pretty. According to a worldwide 2011 study released by Dove, only 4% of women consider themselves beautiful. In Britain, eating disorders claim more lives than any other mental illness. Kat Pugh is recovering from the disease.
It had a knock-on effect psychologically because I was feeling very vulnerable at this point. So it did trigger me to lose weight. I was suffering from malnutrition and had to be seen in A&E as a result.
The fashion industry has a big impact on a woman's self-esteem.
They say that after reading 3 minutes of any fashion magazine, women feel worse about themselves. Over 75% of women felt terrible about themselves.
Janet Easter is the co-founder and style editor of Verily magazine, a fashion and lifestyle website with the slogan, "Less of who you should be, more of who you are." No photoshopped models here. Janet says most magazines start with the idea you're not enough. So they want to show healthy, happy, and authentic women.
We keep the moles and the lines and the freckles because we think that's beautiful. That makes women who they are.
This style editor knows it's a challenge for women to always appreciate their beauty, but she believes it's a battle worth fighting.
It's a call, I think, for women to continually and daily find who they are in God's eyes, to know their own dignity, and even if they don't feel it, to continue to believe it and to strive in that.
And hopefully that belief becomes the latest trend.
Janet says even if we don't buy magazines, we're still bombarded with skewed images of women just going to the grocery store. She suggests surrounding yourself with trusted friends who can remind you of your real beauty. Brian?
Thank you, Catherine. I hope I'm one of them. You are really beautiful. Leonard Nimoy, best known as Mr. Spock on Star Trek, has died. His son says he passed away this morning at age 83. Nimoy followed his Star Trek run with a notable career as actor and director, but to many, he'll always be Spock. His pointy-eared, half-human, half-Vulcan character was the calm counterpoint to William Shatner's Captain Kirk. Star Trek reruns are still popular today. A controversial Holy Cross priest who served 35 years as president of the University of Notre Dame has also died. Father Theodore Hesburgh will be remembered by many as a civil rights leader. He alienated some Catholic alumni, refusing the Vatican's demands to conform to church dogma, insisting on open theological debate. Father Hesburgh died last night on the Notre Dame campus. He was 97. Some exceptional pro-life leaders passed away this week. Charles Donovan, president of the Susan B. Anthony List Education Fund, is here to talk about Dr. John Willke and Dr. Charles Rice. So, Chuck, Jack Willke's handbook on abortion sold more than 1 million copies. This was at the end of the sexual revolution. What kind of counter-narrative was he telling?
Well, Brian, he and his wonderful wife, Barbara, they spent 65 years together. They lived and told a narrative of an alternative to our culture of hedonism and disrespect for human life. They were pioneers. They wrote that book before abortion was really the household word it is today, and they warned our society of what was coming with the devastation this would wreak on women and babies.
I was blessed to know Jack and Barbara Willke very well, and they're just really incredible people. What do you think their work did to contribute to grassroots education for the pro-life movement?
Well, I think it was almost everything at the beginning in terms of grassroots education. You mentioned the 1.5 million books. People say sold. You know, I helped pack some of those books back in Cincinnati where I was a post-college student, and they gave a lot of them away, most of them away. They gave away all of their time lecturing around the country. They must have addressed audiences in 30 or 40 nations and in every state. They were wholeheartedly committed, and in their family life and in their worship as well.
You shared that you met Dr. Willke at Notre Dame, where you went to school. Dr. Charles Rice was a professor there at Notre Dame. He wrote books about Catholic identity and education, natural law. He wrote about the Supreme Court, public prayer. I wonder if he could have anticipated these issues, how they would become just so fiercely debated many years later.
Well, I think the greatness of both Jack Willke and Charles Rice was that they did anticipate, and they were sentinels. Charles Rice's book, Vanishing Right to Live from 1969, really predicted, if you read all the pages in his views on natural law, he saw how all of these issues, the durability of the family, the sanctity of marriage, the preciousness of human life, they were woven together. And they also were woven into the fabric of our law. So both men, I think, saw a long way down the history of our times and helped lead us in a different direction.
And the pro-life movement has mushroomed since.
Yes.
But these pioneers, don't you think that today's pro-lifers sort of still kind of follow in that coattail effect there?
Well, so many thousands of them do. I think we're probably now at a third generation of incredible young people surging into the life issue. They may not know the names of these two men, but they owe them a debt, frankly, that they'll never be able to repay, except by witnessing for life.
Do you see young leaders rising up who will fill those spots?
Well, I was fortunate enough not only to know these two individuals personally, but to be on the March for Life just a month ago here in our city in Washington, D.C. And yes, you saw hundreds of thousands of young people who I think are ready to lead for life.
Are you encouraged by what you see in the pro-life movement?
I do. I see women leaders have risen by the dozens. They head the majority of pro-life groups today. They speak of the life issue with a deep resonance. We shouldn't forget, though, the older generation of men like Jack and Charlie Rice, who were leaders for their time and, in my view, for all time.
Giants. They inspired you and me and many of us.
Absolutely.
We appreciate Charles Donovan, president of the Susan B. Anthony List Education Fund. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Brian.
And thank you for joining us. We appreciate the fact that you watch us every night here on EWTN News Nightly. Until Monday, we encourage you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can always watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Have a wonderful weekend. Good night, and may God bless you.